Silence becomes powerful the moment you stop using it as a reaction and start using it as a reflection of your self-respect. Most men think silence is a trick, a tactic to make her chase, or a way to spark fear of loss. But when your silence is born from confidence, not insecurity, everything shifts. You're no longer trying to get her attention or force a response. You're simply stepping back because you refuse to participate in a dynamic where your effort isn't matched. That kind of silence isn't a game, it's clarity, it's boundaries, and it's emotional control. When a woman senses that your silence isn't coming from anger or manipulation, but from a place of inner strength, that hits differently. She starts realizing that your presence was never guaranteed. Most men talk too much, over explain, and try to justify their worth. But a man who knows who he is chooses silence because he doesn't need to prove a thing. He doesn't need to argue for his value. He doesn't need to force closeness. He understands that if someone truly wants him, they won't make him question where he stands. Silence becomes a mirror that reflects her actions back to her. If she pulled away, your silence makes her feel her own distance. If she disrespected you, your silence forces her to sit with the weight of her behavior. And here's the truth: most men avoid silence as the purest form of emotional strength because it shows you're in control of yourself. Words can be impulsive. Reactions can be emotional, but silence is chosen. It means you're no longer seeking validation or attention. You're simply observing, protecting your peace, and allowing the situation to reveal itself. When you stop reaching out, she starts noticing the space, she starts questioning the shift, she starts replaying moments in her mind, trying to understand where she lost your energy. And that's when doubt enters. Not because you forced it, but because silence exposes what constant communication used to cover. In that quiet space, she begins to realize you're not like the rest. You're not the man who falls apart when distance appears. You're not the man who chases after someone who isn't choosing him fully. You're the man who steps back confidently because you trust your worth. And that confidence creates the exact environment where wonder grows. She starts thinking about you more, not less. She feels your absence more deeply than she ever admitted. She begins to notice the difference between your energy and the attention of other men. Your silence becomes the gravity she can't ignore. A man who stands firm in silence doesn't do it to punish her. He does it to protect himself. He does it because he understands that connection without respect is empty. He does it because he's finally choosing himself. And when a man truly chooses himself, that's when everything around him starts to change. Ending line: only silence isn't your weakness, it's the doorway to your power. Doubt doesn't start when you walk away. It starts the moment she can no longer feel your energy feeding the connection. Women are deeply intuitive and they notice even the smallest emotional shifts long before they ever admit it. When you stop pouring attention in her world, she feels the silence like a sudden drop in temperature. She becomes aware of the absence she never expected. She gets used to being pursued, comforted, reassured, and checked on, and when that energy disappears, her mind becomes the loudest voice in the room. At first, she may try to act unbothered. She tries to convince herself she made the right decision, that pulling away was necessary, that you'll eventually reach out like you always did. But every hour you remain silent creates tiny cracks in her confidence. She starts questioning whether she misjudged your attachment. She wonders if you've finally seen her inconsistencies, her attitude, or her disrespect. She begins thinking about the moments where she pushed too far, expecting you to chase harder. But now the chase is gone, and she's left confronting the possibility that she overplayed her hand. Doubt grows even stronger when she realizes you aren't reacting emotionally. You aren't posting to get her attention. You aren't trying to prove anything. You aren't begging for clarity or fighting for a place in her life. That calmness hits deeper than any argument ever could, because silence backed by self-control shows a level of strength most men never display. It shows you're a man who doesn't panic when he loses someone. It shows you're a man who values his energy enough to protect it. And it shows you're willing to walk away when something stops feeling mutual. The biggest trigger of doubt is the shift from predictability to uncertainty. She once knew your patterns, how quickly you reply, how available you were, how invested you seem. But now she can't read you. She doesn't know what you're thinking. She doesn't know how you feel. She doesn't know if you're slipping away or if you've already replaced the emotional space you once occupied. That uncertainty begins to haunt her more than the breakup itself. Doubt is born from the unknown, and your silence creates that unknown effortlessly. As doubt grows, she starts remembering your value more clearly. The calm masculine presence you brought, the emotional security she felt, the consistency she took for granted. She starts comparing you to every other guy around her, and suddenly, things don't feel as exciting as she imagined. Doubt becomes a mirror that reflects her own immaturity and impulsiveness. And whether she admits it or not, that mirror can be uncomfortable to look into. This is why your silence matters. Not to punish her, not to manipulate her, but because it gives her the space to see what life actually feels like without your energy. Ending line only: doubt begins the moment she realizes losing you wasn't as easy as she thought. When you finally stop chasing, something powerful happens inside you. It's almost like you exhale for the first time in months. The noise quiets, the overthinking slows down, and you begin to realize just how much energy you were giving away without ever getting the same in return. Key point 3 is all about that turning point. The moment you understand that silence isn't a weapon, it's a mirror. And when she's faced with that mirror, she begins to see everything she missed. Not because you're trying to prove something, not because you're playing a game, but because you finally stepped back and allowed reality to speak louder than your effort ever could. You see, people rarely appreciate what's constantly available. When someone knows you're always going to text first, always going to fix things, always going to chase, they start to take you for granted without even realizing it. But the moment you stop over giving The moment you stop trying to solve everything for her, she starts feeling the emptiness that your presence used to fill. She starts noticing the absence of your warmth, your consistency, your emotional availability. That's when doubt enters her mind, not doubt about you, but doubt about her decisions, her attitude, her priorities. She begins to wonder if she misread your strength as weakness. She begins to question whether your patience was actually quiet confidence. She begins to think that maybe you weren't the one who needed her attention, maybe she was the one who depended on yours. This is where your silence becomes powerful. It forces her to confront her own choices. No lectures, no explanations, no emotional paragraphs, just distance, just space, just the absence of what she used to take for granted. And silence has a way of revealing truths that conversations never could. When she reaches for her phone and sees no message from you, when she scrolls through her notifications and yours is missing, when she realizes the energy shifted and it wasn't because she pushed you, but because you walked away on your own terms, that's when regret starts growing inside her. Not the dramatic kind, but the quiet, lingering kind, the kind that whispers, maybe I should have treated him differently. And while she's wrestling with her thoughts, something even more important is happening in you. You're rediscovering your value. You're realizing that your worth was never dependent on someone else's attention. You're remembering who you were before the overthinking, before the emotional imbalance, before you gave too much of yourself to someone who gave too little back. That's the beauty of silence. It heals you while it confronts her. It gives you back your center while shaking hers. Your absence becomes the very thing that makes her see your importance more clearly than your presence ever could. In the end, your silence isn't about punishing her, it's about respecting yourself. And once you choose self-respect over chasing, everything begins to align exactly the way it was meant to. There's a moment every man reaches when he finally stops trying to convince someone of his worth and starts living in it instead. Key point 4 is exactly about that shift, the subtle but powerful transformation that happens when you begin to focus on your own life instead of waiting for her to notice you, appreciate you, or choose you. Because the truth is, the moment you reclaim your attention from someone who didn't value it, your entire energy changes. Your silence doesn't just create space between you and her, it creates space within you, space to breathe, space to rebuild, space to become the man she didn't expect you to become without her. When you pull your energy back, something incredible happens. You stop reacting and start evolving. You start shifting your focus toward the parts of your life that were neglected while you were trying to hold on to someone who wasn't meeting you halfway. You rediscover your ambitions, your goals, your discipline. You remember what it feels like to wake up with purpose rather than anxiety. You remember the version of yourself that didn't need validation to feel grounded. And as your world begins to elevate, she feels it shift even from a distance. Because women can sense when a man stops orbiting around them. They can feel when his attention is no longer predictable, when his emotional energy is no longer centered on them, when his silence isn't coming from weakness but from grounded self-control. That's when she starts paying attention, not because you're doing anything directed at her, but because life is moving forward without her involvement. She sees you growing, focusing, improving, and glowing in ways she never expected. She notices the absence of your old patterns, the good morning texts, the over-explanations, the emotional availability on demand, and instead of feeling secure, she begins to feel something she wasn't prepared for, uncertainty. That uncertainty becomes the bridge between her doubt and her regret. It makes her replay the moments where she dismissed your efforts. It makes her think about the times she treated you as an option. It makes her realize that your silence isn't a pause, it's progression, and nothing shakes someone harder than watching the person they took for granted evolve without needing them. That's when she begins to wonder, did he finally give up on me? Did he move on? Did he find peace somewhere else? Did he realize he deserved better? Meanwhile, you're not sitting around waiting for those questions to form. You're not wondering what she thinks or if she misses you. You're too busy leveling up, too focused on your own journey to be distracted by uncertainty. That's the beauty of this stage. Your silence no longer comes from emotional exhaustion. It comes from emotional intelligence. You've learned how to protect your peace, how to invest your energy into places where it grows instead of drains, and how to let people feel the consequences of their own choices. And that's where the true power lies. Not in trying to make her regret losing you, but in becoming a man who no longer needs her to recognize your worth. In the end, the silence you once feared becomes the strength that guides you forward. There comes a point in every man's journey where he finally understands that peace is not something he finds in another person. It's something he builds within himself. Key point 5 is about reaching that stage where you no longer allow someone else's inconsistency, indecision, or emotional chaos to dictate your emotional stability. Instead of chasing reassurance, you create your own. Instead of hoping she'll finally understand your value, you begin to live in a way that makes your value undeniable, not to her but to yourself. And once a man reaches that level of self-ownership, everything shifts. When you choose silence not as a tactic, not as payback, but as a lifestyle of emotional discipline, you stop feeding into drama. You stop explaining yourself to someone who never truly listened. You stop trying to fix what was never yours to fix. It's not a game, it's a standard, a boundary, a declaration that you refuse to hand your peace over to someone who didn't know how to hold it. And this is where the real growth begins, because instead of reacting to her distance, you start responding to your own needs. You refocus on your financial stability, your mental clarity, your physical strength, your spiritual grounding. You invest in the version of you that existed long before she walked into your life and will continue to exist long after she's gone. This shift isn't loud, it's not dramatic, it's not fueled by anger or bitterness. It's quiet, steady, and powerful. You start waking up earlier, thinking more clearly, choosing better habits, surrounding yourself with people who respect your boundaries. You begin to reclaim the parts of your life that you lost while trying to keep someone who wasn't meant to stay. And as you rebuild yourself, something unexpected happens. The emotions that once controlled you start losing their power. The urge to reach out, to explain, to fix, to save slowly disappears. It's not that you don't care anymore, it's that you finally care about yourself more. And while you're elevating in silence, she starts feeling the shift too. She notices the absence of the man who once overextended himself. She senses the calmness in your responses or the lack of response at all. She starts questioning why her words no longer trigger you, why her mixed signals no longer shake you, why her distance no longer scares you. That's when doubt begins to creep in her mind. Not because you're trying to make her doubt, but because your growth creates a contrast she can't ignore. A man who used to be predictable is now grounded. A man who used to chase validation now carries himself with certainty. A man who used to react now simply moves forward. And the irony is, the more you choose peace, the more she begins to lose hers. Because nothing creates regret like watching someone you took for granted rise into a version of himself that no longer needs your approval or your presence. In the end, your silence becomes the clearest message you ever send, not to her but to yourself. There comes a moment when a woman who doubted you, who dismissed your value, who thought your silence was weakness, finally realizes it wasn't silence at all, it was transformation. It was you choosing to grow past the version of yourself who tolerated confusion, mixed signals, and emotional crumbs. And that realization doesn't hit her when you talk or explain or plead. It hits her when she sees who you've become without her. That's the essence of key point 6. Your growth becomes her regret. Not because you wanted revenge, but because you finally decided to evolve. When you detach from someone who once held emotional power over you, your life begins to expand in ways she never expected. You stop living in reaction to her behavior and start living in alignment with your purpose. Your silence turns into self-mastery, your distance turns into progress, your absence turns into clarity, and the more you rise, the more she begins to understand what she walked away from. Not a man who needed her approval, but a man who is capable of becoming everything she secretly hoped he would become, just not with her. But understand this clearly. Your transformation isn't about making her jealous or proving a point. It's about choosing the version of your life that she never gave you the space to step into. It's about healing the parts of yourself that once accepted inconsistency as affection. It's about reclaiming your time, your focus, your emotional bandwidth. Because when you stop giving your energy to someone who only gave you confusion, you suddenly have the strength to build the life you always knew you deserved. And that's when the shift in her begins. She starts remembering the little things you used to do, the stability you gave, the loyalty you offered so effortlessly. She replays the moments where she thought you'd always be available, always responding, always waiting. But now you're not. Now you've changed. And what really stings her is knowing she didn't lose you to another woman. She lost you to your growth. She lost you to your evolution. She lost you to the man you were always capable of becoming once you stopped carrying the weight of her indecision. She begins to doubt her choices. She begins to wonder if she misjudged you. She begins to regret the way she treated you. Not because she suddenly sees your value, but because she finally sees what her absence created in you. A stronger man, a calmer man, a man with boundaries, a man she can no longer manipulate with distance or silence. A man who no longer needs her to feel complete. And in that moment, the power dynamic shifts forever. Not because you punished her, but because you outgrew the version of yourself that once accepted less than you deserved. In the end, your silence becomes the beginning of her regret and the foundation of your elevation, and that is the most powerful transformation a man can ever make.